family business. I think a lot of people, when they think of corporate executives and they think of business owners, the media and the politicians sometimes beat up business owners, and there's a negative connotation. And they don't work with the family businesses that I get to do, and they don't work with the family owners that I do, and they don't see the impact that they have on the community. And sometimes the stimulus dollars and the economic political money that goes and flows often goes to Wall Street. And what I wanted to do was share a couple stats about family-owned businesses that might surprise you. 80% of all businesses in the United States are owned by a family or an individual, which is pretty remarkable, 80%. 60% of the total economy, GDP, is generated by family-owned companies. And here's the stat that blows me away. 75% of all new jobs are created by a family-owned company in our country. But we don't talk about it. You don't ever hear a politician talking about family business and what can we do in our communities to grow family business. We talk about how we can create jobs on Wall Street and throw more money at large international businesses when this is the bread and butter of what makes our economy go and what makes our communities go. And when you read anything about Lancaster County, as Forbes magazine has mentioned, done well coming out of the recession. They're low and the recession wasn't as large. And I believe there's a lot of reasons for that. One, the conservative balance sheet. I think there's people here are hardworking, good work ethic. But clearly there's a tremendous fabric of family-owned businesses in Lancaster County. And we're really excited to be here today to talk about that. There are statistics that talk about how many family businesses are passed to the next generation. And Stephen Covey wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a wonderful book. And in there, one of the chapters he talks about, begin with the end in mind. And when I meet with business owners of any kind, I always say, what's the end game? What is your goal? Is your goal to be a steward of this business and pass it to the next generation? That doesn't mean you give it to them for free, but some people, there's no family to pass it to. There's no one to sell it in the organization, so they sell to an outsider. Maybe they set up an ESOP. So what we're talking about today, though, is the concept of being a steward and having a desire to pass that family business on to the next generation. Clearly, with economic challenges, that's not always easy. But it's these types of relationships that make it even more difficult. And here are some statistics that recently came out of a study. About 1/3 of all family businesses make it to the second generation. That's kind of amazing. Only 1 out of 3 actually make it to the second generation. It's less than 20 make it to the third generation, and it's only 7% that make it to the fourth and on, which is really remarkable. So if you're here today and you're a family-owned company and you desire to have your business passed on, and as David said, the many positives that come with that, whether it's the patient capital, a family business in a community tends to favor the idea of investing for the long term. We're not necessarily looking for a return on investment tomorrow. We're willing to wait maybe another 10 years or another generation. The impact in the community. When we do business with a family business, it tends to be more relational because the family brand is often the name of the business. I mean, the High family, we're in Lancaster County. I mean, you think of the High companies, you think of the High family. I mean, the brand is the family. It stands for integrity and put down a good measure, am I right? And you think about the brand that exists there. So how do we get to that next generation? How do we do that? And it's a process of being very intentional. You're part of a family business, I assume, right?
Yes.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. And the benefits of compensation are very different than the benefits of ownership. And having that plan in place and making sure that we understand that compensation is something based on performance and it's market value rates. Just because you're son-in-law or your son or daughter, we're not necessarily going to pay you more, but we're going to pay you what's fair. And having that in a written document and having some governance and having some meetings where we discuss that, people understand that that entitlement is going to be nipped in the bud and it's not going to exist in our company. But likewise, a lot of family companies I know, they struggle with this idea of paying any return on investment, and capital has risk. So if we have owners that have equity put in the business, having a bit of a dividend stream that pays something back to ownership for that return on that risk is very important too. And it helps avoid some of those other conversations where I'm not getting anything out of the business ever. And that's not right either. But Phil actually talks about, as CEO, he mentors, I think it's 25 members of the next generation on a regular basis where he teaches them, and he's grooming the next generation of owners, potentially leaders and members of the workforce. And one of those people will probably be the next CEO of the company. And so I think that process, I mean, Phil sees it as something that might be too decades, spending 10, 20 years mentoring and developing. I think it's so important, having those conversations early and setting that tone. Having a board of advisors, I can't emphasize enough how important I think that is. Even if maybe you can't afford, or your business isn't big enough to have a full-blown board of 4 or 5 business leaders around you, having a personal advisor that confident, maybe a little gray hair, someone that's been around, has seen best practices, has seen some struggles, I think that sounding board will help you maintain some objectivity as you run your business, as you deal with family issues that come up. The next one is developing agreements. I'm such a big proponent, and I'm not an attorney, but I'm a big proponent of having some written documents that at least maybe, obviously we all have corporate agreements, we have buy-sell agreements, but having family compensation plans, a family charter, constitutions, things like that we've actually thought out, discussed among family members, kind of who we are, what we stand for, what we want to be about. Are we stewards of this business? Do we want to pass it on for another generation? As you discuss those things and put them in writing, a lot of positives come from it. And then finally, it was my man in the back, Mr. Bainey back there, are you a family business, or are you a business-owned family? And trying to understand that distinction is so important. I've heard a lot of wise people counsel on this issue, and it really talks about, are we going to run this business like we run our family, or are we going to kind of run it like a business, have some independence, have some governance, but still be a family outside of the business? We have values, we have a family council, we have objectives and goals as a family ownership, but we're not going to let nepotism run the business. Just because your last name is Smith or Johnson doesn't mean you're guaranteed a job. And it doesn't mean you're going to get a vice president role. And it doesn't mean you're going to get a new car every 3 years. Those kinds of things sour the other employees in the organization and ultimately hurt your company. How do you differentiate that and put those segregation lines in place? I think it's so critical to do that for the health of the organization.